Hello everyone, I'm Chetan here. So let's continue from where we had left earlier. So we have gone through what do you mean by data types, right? And so in data types we have learned primitive, non-primitive. We also talked about arrays. Now let's learn about what do you mean by typecasting in Java. Okay, so let's go through that now. Okay, so let me open Eclipse, right? Now guys, since we're gonna learn a new topic, so I'll create a new package, something called as, let's say, D typecasting. Hey, okay. Now let me create a class. Let's say implicit typecasting. Let's say example one. Okay. So this is a class. Now we need main methods. I'll just say main control space. Okay, and just say enter. Just a second. It takes time, so just say enter. Now guys, as we discuss, okay, there are primitive data types in Java. For example, if I say byte b1 equals to, let's say, 10, right, like this. Similarly, I have another int I1 equals to, let's say, something called as 200, like this. Okay. Now if you see here guys, now this byte has certain size, right? The size of byte database is 1 byte, right? Whereas the size of integer data type is something called as something 4 byte, right? So if you try to assign byte to an integer, something like this, let's say I1 equals to B1. So as we can see here, byte is of larger data size and I'm trying to hold, sorry, integer is of larger data size and I'm trying to hold byte within integer, right? So when you hold a larger, smaller data type into a larger data type, this type of conversion is known as implicit typecasting. Now it's very clear that if I assign smaller to a larger, my compiler will not complain me anything, because of course it can, anytime it can hold a byte in an integer, because the range of an integer is high, right? So this type of conversion, which is understood by your compiler on its own, is known as implicit typecasting, right? So if I give you another example, let's say I have something called as integer. Let's say integer I1 equals to maybe 900. Okay, now I'm trying to assign, let's say, let me change it to I2, and let's say D2 equals to I2. Now again, if you see, the size of integer is 4 byte, right? Whereas the size of double is 8 byte. So in this case, if I try to hold 4 byte number in a 8 byte data type, again compiler will not complain you anything here. So smaller data type to a larger data type conversion is called as implicit typecasting. So in case of an implicit typecasting guys, okay, it's very straightforward that there is no data loss here, right? Meaning if I try to print the value of D2 here, so the value of D2 will be as it is. So if you see here, the value is 900. Okay, it's displayed in dot zero because it's a decimal number, right? But there is no data loss as such here. Similarly, if I try to print this I1, again I1, the value of I1 will be same as that of B1. So if you see, B1 was 10, I assign it to I1 and now it's printing the I1. So there is no data loss happening over here. Also, this type of conversion is called as widening basically. Okay, because smaller to a larger, this is called as widening basically, right? Now there is another type of typecasting. So I hope everybody is clear with implicit typecasting, right? There is another type of typecasting in Java, and that is called as explicit typecasting. Okay, explicit, let's say typecasting one, for example, like this. Okay, now in case of an explicit typecasting, so let me create a main method first. So for example, I have an integer I1 equals to, let's say, 1000, right? Now this integer I'm trying to hold it in a byte basically, right? So I'm trying to assign I1 to byte here. So here your compiler is complaining because you're trying to assign larger data type in, or here is integer, to a smaller data type, right, which is byte in this case. So in this case your compiler will complain saying that this type of conversion is not allowed, right, because of course byte has a small range. So in this case we're gonna instruct the compiler that can you do it forcefully for me. Okay, so in front of I1, it is of integer data type, I'm gonna put a byte over here. So in this case your integer is forcefully converted into a byte data type. So of course if you convert 1000 to a byte data type, there will be a data loss because byte b1 cannot hold this number, right? So and if you try to print the value of b1, you will see a random number getting generated within that range basically. So if you see minus 24, so 1000 converted to minus 24, right? So can I say, so when you instruct compiler to force some data type to another data type forcefully, this type of conversion is called as explicit typecasting in Java, right? Now what are the things which are which can happen here? So there could be a data loss, right? There could be a data loss here, right? So I can say there could be a data loss, and this is called as narrowing basically, because we are assigning a bigger data type to a smaller data type. So this is called as narrowing basically, right? So I hope you have understood. Let me revise that. So typecasting in Java is of two. Okay, one is implicit and the other is explicit, right? In case of an implicit, okay, there is no data loss, okay, and this is also known as widening, right? In case of explicit, there is a data loss, okay, and this is called as narrowing, like this. Fine, right? So of course, see explicit, so everybody might think that then why explicit typecasting is there in picture. So in the upcoming session we're gonna see that, for example, I have something called as driver is my, let's say, is my class, right? Now I want to typecast this to something called as, let's say, text screenshot, like this. Okay, so I'm forcefully converting this driver class to a text screenshot class. So this is where the explicit typecasting will come in picture in the upcoming sessions. Okay, of course it is not used for assigning a bigger number to a smaller number, because there is a data loss and it would create unreliability in your program, right? Okay, right. So let's move on, right? Then now I'm gonna create another package, and in this package, guys, okay, I will create something called as operators, right? Now every language will eventually have the operators, right? Why? Because of course we're gonna perform addition, we will have to do the comparison. At times we might need to increment or maybe decrement, right? Or maybe we will have to do a logical comparison, or maybe relational comparison, right? Right. So in order to perform all these operations in any language, we come across something called as operators basically, right? So let me quickly walk through some of the operators which we're gonna frequently use in our programs, right? So let's say I'll just say operator example 1. Okay, so let me create a main method. So in this case, let's say I have two numbers, right? Something like 100, and let's say I2 equals to 200. Let's say I want to do the summation of these two numbers, so I'm gonna use simply the plus operator. So I1 plus I2 here, and if you just execute this particular one, it's gonna print the 300 here. Do you see here 300? So plus is also a concate operator, but when you use plus in the context of arithmetic operation, it will act as a add operator. Similarly, you're gonna have something called as you have multiplication, you have division, you have mod, and so on and so forth, right? Then of course we have subtraction as well, like this. Okay, now at times you might want to compare two numbers. For example, let's say I want to do, let's say whether I1 is less than I2, right? So of course I am doing the comparison here. So what will be the value here? Yes, of course this will return you as a true, right? So if I execute this, so this is gonna give me a true, but because I1 is less than I2, right? Similarly, you might come across less than, or maybe greater than. Okay, then less than equal to, or maybe greater than equal to, and so on and so forth, or maybe uh, not equal to, like this. Okay, these are relational operators. Whereas, for example, I have a variable, let's say int, for example, uh, I3 equals to 10, right? Now let's say I want to increase this I3 variable by 1. So I'm going to just say here I3 plus plus, like this, right? So here I'm increasing I3 by 1. So this is known as postfix operator. And if I try to print the value of this, right, so of course it will print what? It's gonna print something called as 10 here, right? So the value of I3 is printed first, and then it is incremented by 1, right? So of course it's gonna print 10 here, and then in the next line, if you just say again I3, it will be printed 11 here, because it's a postfix operator, right? So like this one. Okay, similarly you have guys something called as prefix operator as well, like this. Okay, so if I just say here plus plus, let's say I4. Okay, so in this case I4 is incremented first and then it is printed, so it's gonna print you 21. So if I execute this particular, so if you see 10 got printed over here, then it is printing 11 because it had incremented by 1. Then if you see here, it is printing it as 21 because it's a prefix operator, prefix operator, whereas this one is postfix operator, like this. Okay, understood. So in Selenium we will definitely come across this arithmetic operations, or maybe this relational operators and postfix, prefix, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we will be coming across these examples as in when we take variety of examples, right? So I will not spend much time on operators because it's very basic stuff any programming language will have, right? Now let's move on, guys. So the next package I'm gonna create, just a second. So I will create a next package for something called as loops now. Okay, now what do you mean by loops basically, and where we might come across a loop? Okay, so let's create a very first example, right? So so whenever you want to perform a repetitive task basically, okay, we go for loops basically. For example, I have something called as um, for example, I want to print numbers from 1 to 10, right? So how I'm gonna do this? So if you see here, I have to perform a repetitive task, right? Task here, right? Now whenever okay, whenever I want to perform a repetitive task, generally I go for loops basically, right? So in Java, the the loop which you're going to frequently use is for loop basically, right? So just write on for and just say like this. Okay, for I'm gonna say, let's say integer I equals to 0, I less than 10, I'm gonna say I plus plus basically. So this is a loop. Now this loop will be iterated 10 number of times, right? It starts with 0 and this is a condition and I'm incrementing a value by I. So when it gets executed, if you see here, okay, when I say print I, so first time when control will come here, it will initialize I equals to 0, then it's going to check the condition. If the condition is true, then this code gets executed, this line gets executed, and then it is incremented by 1, right? So if I execute this particular block, so do you see I'm getting 0 to 9 as the output here, right? Now if I make it 20, this line will be executed till this condition is true basically, right? So here it is printing 0 to 19 basically, right? Now I can definitely have a for loop within a for loop, right? For example, I have this one for loop and I create another for loop. Let's say integer, let's say j equals to 0, j is less than 10, and let's say j plus plus, like this, right? Now if you see here, so I'm having two for loops. This is a outer for loop, this is an inner for loop, and of course, so let me reduce the, let's make it 2 by 2 so that we'll get less output. And let's say I want to print this multiplication of I into j, right? So the outer loop is executed by 2 times and the inner loop is executed 2 times, right? So if I execute this one, so of course I should see the multiplication from here, right? So let me put a star line over it just to differentiate the output. Okay, so if you see from here, I got a multiplication of these two combinations, right? So this is nothing but a for loop. Keep this in mind, this I is local to this block only. Okay, if I try to print the value of I outside this block, this variable is not recognized because this is local to this block itself. Okay, the way we discuss method variables is the same concept, right? Now guys, let's say I have, again I'll take a for loop, maybe example 2. Okay, now let's say guys, I have a main method. Okay, in this main method, let's say I have a array. Okay, and the array is numbers, let's say, and this array has some numbers, right, like this. Okay, now let's say I want to iterate all elements of this array. So how do I iterate an array? Okay, so the simple answer to this is using a for loop. So we know that this array has certain lengths, right, as discussed in the previous video. So if I execute this array has a length of 4, right? Now let's say I want to iterate over this array, right? So what I'm going to do here, I will simply say for, okay, int I equals to 0. This is the initialization point of my for loop, and I want to iterate this loop till the length of this array, right? So I'm going to say here this dot length, and I'll say I plus plus, right? So this is how I've created a loop for the till the length of the array basically, and then finally I'm going to print the array element. Now we know that this is the array nums, and this num of, let's say, I. So the first time I is 0, is I less than 4, so the condition is true, then this gets executed. So nums of I means 0 here, so the first element gets printed. Now the next time I is 1, again I is less than length. Now again this line gets executed with 36 number. So it will be executed till it reaches, till this condition is true basically, right? So if I execute this, did you notice it's printing from 18 to 98? 4 is the length of this array. Fine. Okay. Okay. Now there is another way to write down a loop, same for loop, in some different style using something called as for each loop basically, right? Now the same example, if you see here, let's say again I have an integer array. Let's say this time I will say employee IDs, and these are the employee IDs. Okay, I'm gonna say, let's say the employee is 1816, let's say 3456 9, something like this. Okay, now I want to iterate over this array basically, right? So one of the technique what we saw, we can iterate using a for loop basically. If we know the length of the array, we can easily iterate over an array. Now there is another way to iterate over an array, that is nothing but for each. So I'm gonna say for how, what is the syntax? So I'm gonna say for each integer, let's say I, in this collection basically, like this, just a second, like this. Okay, so if you see, there is a difference between a for loop and a for each. For each is a very shortcut way of iterating over a collection, right? So for example, I'm saying this iterate for each I of type integer in the employee IDs collection, and simply say here sys out, sorry, sys out I. Okay, so what I'm doing here, so if you see, you can take it in a different way. For example, I have a basket of fruits, right? Now I want to iterate over that basket of fruits, right? So I'm gonna say here, let's say this is my basket of fruits. So I'm saying for each fruit in this basket, you keep iterating till the time you reach to the end basically. So it's gonna automatically pick the first array element, it will print again, it will pick next element, it will be printing third and fourth, and so forth basically. Okay, fine. So if I execute this particular code, so if you notice here, I'm printing all four elements of my array over here, right, using a for each. Okay, that's it about for each. Now let's quickly learn what is while loop. Okay, let me show you while loop. Okay, so again it's a very easy while loop. Okay, so for example, let's say, so in case if you don't remember the syntax, so this id helps you a lot, this eclipse id helps you a lot. So just type down while and just say control space. So let's say I'm gonna say I want to have a while loop, right? So like this, while loop with condition. Let's say the condition is that I have, let's say, integer I1 equals to 0. Now I want to put a condition till the time I1 is less than 10. You keep iterating this particular loop basically, right? This block basically. So I'm gonna say, let's say sys out I1 basically, right? And then I will say I plus plus. So how it will work, this particular code, how it is going to work, just a second, this is I1, sorry. So your pointer will come here. Okay, when the JVM starts executing this code, it will come in the main method first. It will initialize the I1 equals to 0, then it will come here, it will verify the condition whether I1 is less than 10. So the answer is true, it will go within the block, it will print the value of I1 which is 0 at the moment. Then it's gonna increment the value again, it will come here, it will check the condition. So this will happen till the time the condition is true, right? So if I execute this, do you see 0 to 9 gets printed, because when I1 becomes 10, now 10 is not less than 10, so it will come out of the for this while loop. Okay, so let me see here, this is my while loop basically, right, like this. Now the way we have while loop in Java, similarly we have do while loop as well. Okay, so let me take example of do while loop, right? Just a second. Okay, so this is do while loop. Now what is a difference, what's the difference between while loop and do while loop? So let's quickly understand that. So again, if you don't know the syntax, just type do and just say control space, let's say do while statement. Okay, now I'm gonna print, let's say I'll initialize some variable, let's say integer I2 equals to 0. Okay, I've initialized some variable and I'm trying to print its value. Okay, and then I'm checking a condition. So if you see here, the difference in while loop and do while loop is that in do while loop the block gets executed at least once and then the condition is verified. Okay, so if you see here, even if the condition, let's say, is false, this line gets executed at least once. So if you notice here, just let me execute it. Do you see this got executed at least once, and even if the condition is false, right? So that's the difference between while loop and do while loop, right? All right, just a second.